Tēnā tātou, nā mihi ki a koutou, ko tai mai nei, I rongo I tēnei rōpū, te hui tuatai, mō te kaunihira, mō tēnei, mō te iwi, nō reira, nā iwi o tauranga moana, nā hapu, nā pōtiki tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. Nei, he karakia ki te whakatūwhera a tēnei hui, kia noi tātou. Tui runga, tui raro, tui roto, tui waho, tui te here tangata karongo te ākarongo te pō, nau mai te ihi, te we, te mana, te tapu, paupau ki roto ki a mātou mō tēnei rā, ko I a rā e rongo, whakiriraki ki runga, turu turu, whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumi e, hui e, tai.
Red man's on. Kia ora hemi, o tō karakia, o te rā kia koutou, kua mai tēnei rā, tēnā koutou. We'll get straight into it. Just wanted to get through some the minutiae. Are there any apologies? I certainly haven't received any from the other two members. There are none. We're aware of one late item which we're proposing to, which actually is in the agenda, so we'll deal with that. I understand there's no confidential business to be transferred out in the open. Everyone happy with the agenda as it stands? Okay, no issues there. And obviously if there's any conflicts that anyone wants to declare, now's the time to let us know. But otherwise, there being none, we'll head into the appointment process for Chair and Deputy Chair, and I'm just sort of obviously facilitating for the moment while we talk to that, and then I'll turn the time over to Claire, who'll take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora. So the first item of business is to recommend a chair, which goes through to the council for adoption, and then after that you would appoint a deputy chair. So if there's no questions on the report, I'm happy to answer any questions on the report. If there are none, we can go straight into calling for nominations.
I'd like to nominate Spencer Webster.
I'll second that.
So
Thirded.
Okay. Okay. So we will just put the vote formally, as we will need to do that. So I have a mover and seconder to nominate Mr. Spencer Webster as chair of the Wastewater Management Review Committee. All those in favour? Aye. Any against? No. Spencer, we declare you chair.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So you can take over the appointment.
All right.
Deputy chair.
Well, that takes us then to the deputy chair role, which from the terms of reference has to be an appointed member. So we'll open the floor to see who's willing to put their hand up or nominate someone.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Kure.
Any other comments from anyone? You there? All right, we have a mover and seconder, so we'll put the motion for a vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. No abstentions. So motion carried. Congratulations. All right. So then we've got a couple of reports, 2 or 3 reports to get through, and I'll let the staff. I have said to Wally that it's probably because we've got new committee with new members and even newer members of late. It's probably best to go through it in a reasonable level of detail rather than taking it as read, and we'll deal with any questions after. So, sorry, that's yours. Your first day, Jane.
I'll do local water done well, if that's all right, and then Jane can do the Marine Area Conservation Act.
All right, thank you.
So, yeah, this has been quite a drawn-out process, as you're aware. It started off with the previous government, and it has had a few iterations. We have now come to a preferred way forward, and at the moment we're standing with a preference for a multi-council CCO. Now, this has not been formally adopted yet. We're having some workshops with council next week, and then on I think it's the 14th of July, council will sit and make a final decision on the way forward for local water done well for our council. It's so there was a consultation document, and we went and we sent that out at the same time as the annual plan. So there was a dual consultation process at that time for local water done well and also the annual plan. The feedback we got was pretty split, and you'll see that in item 3, about 42% in favour of a multi-council CCO, and about 39 or 40% roughly of favour of it staying in-house. However, with that, there was a lot of comments around supporting independent governance and getting a board in place to run water in a professional manner. So while it appears split, there were a lot of other comments that supported the CCO, the multi-council CCO model. A submission was also received from Tarangapu in support of a multi-council CCO, and that went in along with the other submissions, so that was well received. There's been some workshops held on 3 waters versus 2 waters. My understanding at the preference at the moment that generally the council prefer 3 waters staying together, and the reason for that was the integrated way in which we run drainage services within council. So our wastewater and stormwater units are combined. They're very similar functions, obviously, with gravity being the main driver. Kia ora whiti, kia ora des. So there was a general acceptance that the integrated approach for the delivery of stormwater and wastewater is preferred. There's also a large amount of our stormwater assets sit within stormwater reserve areas, and there's still a decision to be made around how that land and those assets will be managed in the future, and that's part of the workshopping that we'll be doing with the elected members in the near future. There's been a great deal of financial modelling done around the benefits of it, and over the long term there are financial benefits in having a multi-council CCO. In the first few years they're minimal, but over time those benefits do open up. And as part of the legislation, we are required to submit a water services delivery plan by the 3rd of September this year, and we intend to put that in August. And it's at the moment we are putting that document together as a multi-council CCO with ourselves, Western Bay and Thames Coromandel District Council. So that's what we're looking at the moment. There will be more work done on that, obviously, with elected members in the very near future. So we look forward to having that discussion. Obviously, it's still a bill, and we're waiting for it to be enacted, and that should happen in July this year as well. So we're certainly hoping for that to continue through in its, well, close to its current form. And then, of course, if we do that, if we are going to set up a CCO, the other big decision to be made by the elected members is when that happens. So we're looking at the start of a financial year, and it will be, will it happen on the 1st of July 2026, or will it happen on 1st of July 2027? So that's a future decision for council to make. As part of that, the workshop and the information that will be going to elected members, obviously we do need to stand up a transition arrangement, which may mean appointing some staff members to serve that, and over time we will also need to be appointing with our our partner councils a interim board and interim staff to set up the new CCO. So that will be coming to the council very shortly, and obviously we'll keep you informed on this committee as well. So you see in 27, the next steps, there's an outline there of how far we need to go with this, and really it's getting a decision from council on the 14th of July and then submitting our water services delivery plan to the DIA is the next big steps for us. I'll leave it there. Okay. And I'll try and answer any questions at the moment. There's still a few other decisions to be made before I can give real clarity, I'm afraid, but happy to take questions.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, Wally. Yeah, great summary. My question relates to this particular committee and the role that it plays. Have we given any thought to how that might look when the CCO casts off from council? How would this committee interact with the CCO? Yeah, because I think there's some important stuff that happens here that I'd like to try and understand how it might happen in the future.
I'm afraid I can't give you a solid answer because that is a future decision that needs to be made, whether council decides to keep this committee in-house within council or if it moves over to the CCO. So I'm sorry, I can't really answer the question.
Maybe is another way to approach it, what happens to the resource consents? Do they transfer to the entity or do they stay with the council?
Again, that's a decision that's yet to be made. I would anticipate, because the CCO is responsible for managing those consents, it seems logical to me that the consents would transfer. But that is still a decision to be made by council, whether it holds the consents and then the CCO manages that is a decision for councillors.
Can I just suggest that maybe an action point from this committee back to full council is when we have the workshops that there's a specific item to talk about this issue, just so we don't leave it behind and it is thought of as we go forward.
Certainly, thank you.
Okay. Any other queries?
Will tangata whenua have a input to that decision before full council makes it, or?
I'm not sure of the process. That's something that we'll have to work through with our council as to what level of engagement there is around that.
Because at the moment a resource consent includes us through this committee, so I'm thinking that surely be tangata whenua, or at least us here on tangata whenua members on the committee could have an input to that decision before it's made. That's what I'm thinking because of the resource consent.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sure that if this committee has a strong feeling one way or the other, it can make a recommendation to council.
What's the thinking behind sorry. Wait,
Sorry.
no, we're good.
You finish yours.
Okay. What's the thinking behind the Thames District Council?
We received an approach from them saying that they would like to join with us, so we're considering that strongly. Yeah. We fully expect that a CCO will get stood up, and over time there will be others that will join, or there'll be consolidation of those CCOs over time. That's certainly the government's intention.
style. Just getting back into the report there. These paragraph 9, I suppose, the definition of these reserves. So is it designated? Are they designated stormwater reserves, or is there designation for catchment reserves? Because there are a number of different reserves, that, like historic and even water catchment, that have particular interests to various tangata whenua groups. So is it just a broad definition for catchment, or is there a specific catchment reserve? Yeah.
Good question. There's a real range of reserves that are affected. There is the catchment areas, you're right, there's specific stormwater reserves, and then we just have general reserves as well. And even our general reserves have a lot of stormwater functions as well. So there's, we've plotted it all into GIS around the land impacts and the assets that sit within the land, so that we've got a general understanding of what affects what. But there's still quite a bit of decision making to do around educating a whole range of people around how they might be managed in the future. So the short answer is that's still work to do. We've plotted it, but we haven't had that discussion yet with our elected members around who manages the land, which land will transfer to the CCO, if any, and how all that function, how all that will work. So that's a future piece of work that we'll be doing. Well, engaging with councillors on. Yeah. There's a series of workshops that will need to be held, yes.
Just one, yeah, thanks for that, Wally. Just a question, you mentioned about the three preferred at the moment. We've had a few discussions, but and other councils may well be interested, so you said over time others could join, and obviously a lot of other councils are going through these processes as well, such as we are. Is there a cut-off point where you'll say for the planning process it's only these three for now, or has that already been decided, or could there be a late comer to the mix even with this current planning?
That's not really clear. We have to submit our water services delivery plan by the 3rd of September. And the water services delivery plan outlines who we're partnered with, who's contributing what, the shareholder agreement, those kind of things will all be in that plan. It's pretty well written at the moment, and we'll need to come to the councillors obviously, but it is deliberately left open so others can join later. But when we stand it up, we have to put through a water services delivery plan that is consistent with our standing up. Yeah.
Obviously, I haven't been in all those meetings, but does future investment come from the councils collectively, and therefore decisions on the future services or the shape of the network are made firstly by the councils, or does the CCO have an ability to make a call on the shareholders for the money they want for the maintenance and the growth of the network? Can you help me with that one?
So the shareholders are the councils, and those shareholders will need to agree on what the shareholding split is, if you like. So if a water company, it is a company, it's a council-controlled company, and there will be a shareholding split. Let's say there are 3 councils, they will have to agree on the ownership model for that, and then the levels of service that are provided. So, and there will be, yeah, the water services delivery plan spells out a lot of that, but that's still a piece of work that we need to go through with our councillors. So we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here with because we haven't taken this to the council yet. So really this is an update of, this is supposed to be an update of where we're at, and kind of I got on to the next steps, and probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves with some of it at the moment.
Sorry, I'm just wondering whether you could have a really brief conversation about ring fencing, because I think that might answer the chair's question about who pays for what.
Thanks for the hint. Yes, so the financials will be ring fenced so that all revenue that comes from Tauranga City will be spent on Tauranga maintenance, operations, renewals, and capital works. So, and likewise, if we're with Western Bay, their budgets and revenue will be ring fenced and spent for the Western Bay. There's not going to be cross subsidisation proposed. That may come many years later. There may be conformed pricing across the entire networks, but as we're standing it up, they're completely ring-fenced budgets and financials.
I get the financials and all of that, but the actual services provided, because to me, my thinking just right now off the top of my head, with Thames coming in like that, technically they could tap into our sewage pipeline, is what I'm saying, and I'll use the southern pipeline that was mooted a few years ago. Came all the way from Katikati, and it's only a few miles from Thames. Just as a tangata whenua, and especially as a Ngā Pōtiki native, I'd be just telling you straight off the bat, I'd be against that hooking up there and all of that waste coming back down our end. So, that's a big one to consider, because like I said, technically could do it under that CCO, is what I'm thinking. Resurrect the southern pipeline, but make it a bit longer. Hey, because there is capacity at the Mo for the wastewater treatment plant to take that, and the Te Tumu lot, as far as I know, so...
There's no plans to connect those networks at all. And given the distance involved, I would say it's extremely unlikely.
But yeah, you're building all these pump stations along at Papamoa and Te Tumu there. You could do the same back down that way. And really, Wally, you don't know the thinking of Thames. I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm being straight up. They might be, might be the cheapest way for them to go. So they'll be pushing for it. I mean, they'll be stupid not to push for it if they had a chance of getting, hooking onto it like that.
Yeah, as I said, it's extremely unlikely. And Thames Coromandel District Council have invested heavily in their coastal treatment plants, Whirianga, Whangamata, Taira, all of those areas. So they've put in some very modern, sophisticated plants, and so they're good operators.
It's got one more. Okay. Just given that though, we've got a shared interest in the water take with the Waiari, with Western Bay. There's probably a share cost and a share benefit there. Is that kind of reciprocated with Western Bay with the Southern Pipeline? We're taking as a city, taking Western Bay's sewage and treating it. Is that formalised? Is that costed, or into this at the moment, like with the water take, or do we essentially pay for all the treatment and subsequent disposal and deal with the effects here, or do they have a formal contribution to the treatment of those of that water, that wastewater? Sorry, try to define it.
So at the moment, we solely treat that water from the Waiari for Tauranga City. You're aware, you may be aware that there is a resource consent that provides for 25% of it going to the Western Bay. If that water is taken to Western Bay, they will pay for it. So, as I said, those financials are ring-fenced and there will not be cross-subsidisation. So, at the moment, they have not taken up any of that water from that resource consent, from the plant. So, wastewater, there's, at the moment, the only agreement we have is for Omokoroa. And I'm not aware of any other intentions at this point in time. We invoice them every month for the cost of that treatment. Yeah.
Are there any other issues?
Through you, Chair. Your paragraph 26 where you refer to talking to partner councils, is it fair to say that Thames would be conditional on Western Bay? So it could be Tauranga and Western Bay, but it wouldn't be definitely be Tauranga and Thames? Or I'm just understanding, because I think we can all see the synergies, just like Des had mapped out about things like Waiari and all the common infrastructure all servicing each other. But correct me if I'm wrong, that doesn't exist with there, is it? Because the boundaries will be on the Western Bay. Is that would Tauranga, well, I guess my question is, would Tauranga be considering that, and if so, why would we?
Yeah, none that I'm aware of. The only cross-boundary stuff that we have going on is between us and Western Bay with water supply and wastewater treatment. So Thames Coromandel is quite remote. You know, there's another council between us and them, if you like, or between Western Bay and them. So being in Hauraki, so there's the tyranny of distance, if you like, would prevent any cross use of piping any water or wastewater, those kind of distances.
I was probably saying I'm not actually probably the best equipped to speak to this in the room, but so by all means, Spencer and Lara, jump in if I get the legalese wrong. But yeah, it was just a quick update to the committee on the Marine and Coastal Act, Takatoa Moana Act. Given we were expecting a judgment to be made on the Wahitapu stuff, I think it was by the end of May, but to my knowledge, nothing has come through. But anyway, I'll take you back sort of to the beginning. Yeah, so this, the Marine and Coastal Act sort of introduced mechanisms to recognise Māori customary marine rights. Yeah, as I say there in point 27, there are three probably of relevance to us, rights in relation to resource consents in application areas, applications in relation to coastal conservation activities. And the third one is recognition of wāhi tapu or wāhi tapu areas and the ability to set prohibitions or restrictions within that area. So for us in Tauranga City, we a council was a neutral party to the stage 1 proceedings that were heard on the 12th of October 2021, where the High Court gave customary marine title, awarded customary marine title to Ngā Pauriki, Ngāi Tukuarangi, Ngāti Tapu, Ngāti Hei and Ngāti Pūkenga. And then in December 2022, the court heard further hearings in relation to prohibitions, restrictions on the wāhi tapu status, and a judgment on that has yet to be given, but we were advised we were to expect that by the end of May this year. As I recall, the restrictions and prohibitions relating to that wāhi tapu status, which are of relevance for this committee, would be the no discharge, indirect or direct, of sewage to the bay. So as I interpret that, or as council, as we interpret that, staff, that would sort of impact, I guess, on the ability for us to seek new consents for our seepage consent and our emergency overflow consent at Tamanga. So those consents come up in 2040. That's really it in a nutshell. Yes, as I say, the customary marine title was not enacted yet because we are still awaiting the judgment for the wāhi tapu prohibitions and restrictions, as I understand it. Is there anything more, Spencer, Lara, that you'd like to add to that?
No, that's where it's at.
That's where it's at, yeah.
Does anyone else have any queries?
Kia ora. Kia ora, Jane. I'm just seeing, is the scope of this report, does it include the Heritage New Zealand wāhi tapu registration? Or is it, because
No.
there's a, no.
No,
Because that's been out for a while.
It's more the wāhi tapu that are being sought in the High Court proceedings are more discreet than the registration with Heritage New Zealand. The area that's covered by the registered wāhi tapu that's with Heritage New Zealand.
Yeah.
So they're based around the battle sites mainly, and I think there's a couple of other I can't recall, but they are certainly more discreet than the wāhi tapu registration.
It's just a couple of frameworks there. One of them's under the Heritage Pahiringa Taonga, and then this one's under the Maka. So it just, because it can get confusing, wāhi tapu, and without, especially in the rangatawa with that.
And just probably to add to that, there were stage 2 proceedings as well on the open coast that were heard in, I haven't got the date there, a couple of years ago anyway, 22, yeah. And a judgment wasn't made in relation to customary marine title there, but of relevance to the wastewater activity is the marine outfall that would run straight through that application area. I understood there with the government going back to relook at the test for customary marine title that may be required to be reheard again, but I think that's a grey area as well. So we're unsure whether that will be reheard at a later date or whether a judgment will come on that as well.
Thank you, Jane. So if this gets through around the Waitapu for discharges, and then we seek a renewal in, did you say 2040, what year that is? What are the options there to deal with that change in the situation there, or are there none?
I'm not a lawyer, and we would probably need to seek legal advice on this. As I understand it, for the customary marine title, there are exemptions that could be available for what's called accommodated infrastructure. And I sort of interpret accommodated infrastructure to mean regionally significant and that kind of thing. However, for the Wahitapu, and Lara, please jump in if I haven't quite got this correct, but I understand if the Wahitapu judgment is made and those restrictions and prohibitions stand, then there is no exemption for us, and I don't believe that you would be able to issue a consent because it would be illegal. So. But again, we would be taking some legal advice on that. But that's how I interpret it.
Good point. What was proposed was that the title would be held by the chairs of the representative entities of those 5 groups, whoever they are from time to time, rather than setting up a new entity, and then those entities would then have to collaborate on dealing with the title issues and all the other things that, the catchment plan that needs to come forth. So, yeah, that's the current proposal. But the High Court has to issue that order and agree that that's the proper way to deliver the title. So until we see that, we're not really sure if that's the way it's going to end up. All right, so as you can see there on the screen, we've got the action that staff will consider the committee and the decision making on the delivery model. And then we've got the recommendations that we received this report, and that the committee will provide input into the decision making on the future of the Wastewater Management Review Committee, and can we put "and" in between the "and" resource consents? If probably should say before any transfer to a CCO or potential CCO. Yep. Take out it. Yep. And then just full stop after the first CCO and delete the rest. Yes. Okay.
C. You are seeing. Yeah, you are seeing. Oh. Got it. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion on those before we put them in any edits? Do we have a mover? Tez Heke, seconder. Councillor Kurak. All those in favour? Any opposed? There being none and no abstentions, motion is carried. All right, moving into the late item, which...
So if we just, we'll just accept that, do that, take late item.
Do we have to move that we accept it first? All right, am I allowed to move?
Yes, you can.
Okay, can I move from the chair that we accept this late item? Is there a seconder? Des Heke, all those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? None, it's carried. All right, Jim, over to you. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Anna Hera, is it? I've pushed the button on my end, I think. Can I control it from my end, Anna Hera? Oh, cool, awesome. Kia ora, everybody. I'll just take you through the activity report. So I've just put this into a presentation. So the presentation follows pretty much what's laid out in the activity report. Happy to answer questions as we go along. Oh, yeah. Is that better?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, as I say, happy to take any questions as I go along. All good, no worries. Okay, so since the last committee meeting, all the monitoring results for the council's wastewater consents are within the consent requirements. This includes all the discharges from the outfall. As we touched on back in March earlier this year, council's currently preparing the monitoring upgrade and technological review as part of the consent 62878. The purpose of this report is to review TCC's compliance with the wastewater consents from 2019 through to 2024. The consent specifies committee members should make recommendations in relation to the independent consultant to be appointed to undertake the report, which is Becker and Maria Consulting. Currently, a workshop was in the process of being organised for around mid-July. I believe that an email has been sent out for the 18th of July, so it'd be good to get some confirmation if that date works with everybody else. Staff at this will present the final report and before submitting this to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. So before moving on, I thought I'd just give councillors who are new to the committee just an update of the sampling work that we do as part of the resource consents. So we do twice weekly testing of the discharge, which is taken post-UV. We do annual tour shellfish collection sampling along various stations throughout either side of the ocean outfall. We do mussel sampling at the outfall as well annually. As well as seepage monitoring, which is shown in that image to the right. Those samples are collected either by staff or consultants where appropriate. Okay, moving on to the wastewater overflows. So since the last committee meeting, we've had a total of 126 blockages that have been notified through to council. 88 of those did not leave the network and were contained to land. 4 of those discharged to the stormwater system, and 34 of those potentially made the receiving environment. Those were all notified to the Regional Council, Toitiora and RMA reps. We undertake water quality sampling until put signage out and notifications until the results indicate that there's no further impacts on water quality. Just a bit of more extra detail around this. So where we do get the blockages, the majority of the blockages that we've had recently are caused by fat soils and grease, wet wipes and rags and the like. Where we do have those and we identify which catchment it is, we conduct leaflet drops in those areas to raise awareness. We've got an ongoing wet wipe campaign and wider education efforts that are currently ongoing. And again, we'll always continue on early detection to prevent overflows and to reduce these impacts that we have. So in terms of the emergency discharges, we've had no emergency discharges since the previous committee meeting, and all the seepages are within the consented limits. In terms of odour complaints, we've had no odour complaints received for Tamanga or Chapel Street since the last committee meeting. The images on the right show the new odour scrubber that we're currently commissioning at Tamanga Wastewater Treatment Plant. So those pictures just show the construction phase. It's currently just going through its commissioning at the moment. So this is enabling quite a significant reduction in the footprint, which frees up land at Tamanga for the new inlet works project. Moving on to Clarify 3, so the image on the right show the current state of play as of last week. So the installation of the Clarify mechanism scheduled for June 25 with commissioning planned for July 25. The Clarify is dependent on the completion of Bioreactor 2, so it won't be fully operational and as part of the treatment process until this is commissioned, which is anticipated the last quarter of 2026. Moving on to Bioreactor 2, so again the image on the right shows what it currently looks like at the moment. The ground improvement works have completed just before Easter, so we're still preparing for the above ground construction. Commission of the Bioreactor 2 is scheduled for the last quarter of 2026, which I just said. Once that's all commissioned, Bioreactor 1 will be taken offline for some maintenance post-commissioning. This does mean that we're not going to have both bioreactors operational until the middle of 2027. The new inlet works, so that picture on the right just shows a concept design, a preliminary design. So this infrastructure is there just to manage the future flows of the plant and allow for efficient operation and maintenance. The delivery of this is currently sitting in the financial year of 2028. Moving on to the wastewater network. So in terms of the operations, we've completed the major pipe relining at the Mount since the last committee meeting. Ongoing relining works around Tauranga Central, Judea and Brookfield area. And again, the reline extends pipe life efficiency while trying to minimise community impact. And those images show just a couple of the recent projects we've been doing. In terms of, this is just the Golden Sands Drive, which is a tomo that we had recently. So in May this year, so we had a 5-metre tomo discovered opposite Golden Sands School. So this was caused by a collapsed section of the wastewater pipe. So the collapse was due to H2S gas erosion, quite significant depth. We did emergency works, included ground stabilisation, dewatering, sheet piling, and overpumping so we could get rid of the wastewater. Temporary liner was installed and a concrete patch to restore the flow. A full-length custom line has been ordered and will be installed in around about August as a permanent fix. Here is a couple of images of the concrete pipe. Okay, moving on to the Environmental Mitigation Enhancement Fund. So just to recap, this fund was established under Discharge Consent 62878. The purpose is to mitigate and compensate for environmental and cultural impacts of the wastewater scheme, as well as to enhance environments that's been adversely affected. Guidelines were approved in 2020 with Tangata Whenua input. In mid-2024, Tangata Whenua members expressed an interest to review the guidelines and to revisit the engagement mechanisms. This review will be led by Tangata Whenua with staff support as needed. That shows the current state of play of the current fund balance. Do you want to talk to the PBC?
Yeah, so the next item was just the program business case. I believe I have presented to the committee on the program business case before, but just a quick recap. Originally, the focus of the business case was the marine outfall. What were we going to do to address the condition and capacity constraints of the outfall? And then it became quickly apparent that we needed to consider sort of the plants and network in addition to the outfall system together. And we felt the best way to do that was through a program business case using Treasury's Better Business Case model. So we started on this piece of work, I would say 2-3 a good wee while ago, with a project team of staff consultants and Des Fitty and a representative for Ngā Pauriki Te Rangi Mārie Williams. So yes, as I say, we've been working on it for 2 or 3 years, and we are now at the point where we are looking at, we're undertaking modelling, looking at future population growth, how that could be serviced moving forward, utilising existing treatment plants and the possibility of new additional treatment plants. We're looking at in Western Bay also where it makes sense to, and look at how potentially those areas may be serviced as well. What we are proposing at this point, given the forthcoming decisions on the CCO, etc., is that that PVC is paused. We just, I guess our view is it's not an appropriate time to continue the PVC process and take the long list down to a short list of options to sort of inform any future investment in wastewater. So yes, I guess at this point we are sort of indicating that our view is the PVC should be paused. Do you want to speak to that further, Wally?
It's just until we get some clarity around what our future holds and what kind of form and function we're going to have going forward. So it would be, I guess, we don't want to lock a future organisation into something that may be have wider implications on the way that would operate and be set up. So we would recommend that we just slow this down for a little bit. Still complete the long list of options that we've got, and have a clear idea of what that long list looks like, and then just hold until we have some clarity around what we're doing next as an organisation. There's been a lot of changes over the years with this, with government changes, and yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Okay, sorry, I've got about 2 or 3. Bioreactor, that's all finished and went well in the end.
So the ground improvements that were required for Bioreactor 2, they're all complete, and that contract is off-site, and HEB, who are have the contract for the above ground structures, are on site at the moment, and they're making their site how they want to proceed, so that over the next 15 to 18 months you'll see that structure come out the ground, and as Jim mentioned, we're hoping to have it on commissioned and working sort of towards the end of 26. Yeah.
Sorry, my next question was around the H2O gas and how that affected that pipe. So what was the pipe made of?
Yep. Back to me, through the chair. So, so the pipe itself was made of AC concrete, so asbestos concrete, and what tends to happen is that's very alkaline, and obviously the wastewater is quite acidic, and with certain conditions you can get that H2S gas being produced to such an extent that it can corrode that pipe. So essentially what looks to have happened is that the top of the pipe has sort of been eroded over a period of years, much quicker than you would have expected that pipe to erode, and yeah, that has caused the roof of it to collapse, and then over time the soil has obviously sort of been eaten away at until on the 1st of May we ended up with a large hole in a lady's front yard, which wasn't ideal at all.
So, sorry, supplementary, just is it likely to happen again in another?
So we have, I guess it's the nature of wastewater. So it does happen all over the place. But obviously we have a number of things in place to try and prevent that from happening, or to catch it in time for our renewals program. So we have a CCTV process that we go through that looks at varying parts of the network every year. We have our asset management that looks at the time these pipes have been in the ground and when we would expect them to start to deteriorate to a point where we would need to renew them. And we have other programs that are looking at, you know, the life of the pipelines that we have in the ground. So there's a number of things we do to try and catch that. Obviously, this one we weren't expecting to deteriorate as quickly as it can. So what we are looking, based on this particular issue, is do we have other pipes close to pump stations like this one that could be in a similar state that we haven't necessarily picked up through all those other programs we have. So that's something we're looking at the moment. There's particular scenarios, I guess, that have potentially caused this. This pump station is probably only 25 years old, and the lines around it are sort of similar age, and so you wouldn't have expected a pipe such as this to deteriorate so quickly. One of the causes of that may have been the fact that when it first started up, you only had a certain number of population in the area, so your flows were not necessarily what the pump station and the pipelines were built for initially, and that, I guess, lower flow could have meant that we had wastewater sitting in the line, for example, longer than it would have once you get those flows going and the pumps are working continuously. So there's things like that we can look at. Are there other areas in the city where that may also have been a problem? And we'll go and have a look at those as well and make sure that we're not missing anything there. Hopefully that answers. Yeah.
Thank you. Just around the Environmental Mitigation Enhancement Fund and the review of it, what were the issues identified in 2024 in terms of wanting another review, given it was reviewed in 2020? What are some of the key points there?
I can't recall whether I spoke to this committee about this before, but I'll give it a go. The intention was that an independent panel would be appointed to receive applications from the public for proposals aimed at the enhancement of Rangataua and possibly other areas. And when I came on board, that conversation had been revived to the point of CVs were reviewed again and things of that nature. The concern I expressed then was that the main problem with that kind of scheme is you end up with a random selection of proposals that are suited to those proposing it for whatever objectives they have, but whether or not they lead to mitigation or enhancement that actually is required, that actually is desired by particularly tangata whenua, that was a real question I had in my mind. And my sense of it was that this random process was going to end up with random outcomes. And so I think it's a better use of the resource if you actually first assess what's required, and secondly then look to what the kind of mitigation or enhancement measures might be. And for me, there's probably two steps to this. There's, once the MACA title comes out, there needs to be a plan produced for Rangataua, and that will set down some baseline things and different parts of what are normally in those kinds of plans. I think then once you've got that, then you can talk about, all right, well, there's clearly some identified issues in Rangataua that need improvement, enhancement, remediation. Then we can go to those and look at that, and then you can start developing a program of activities that are based on those assessments. So it was a bit more of a methodical approach that started with an overall plan first and then went to the projects that might well lead to better enhancement of the environment. So that's roughly the thinking. And I mean, we're in this kind of limbo situation where we're waiting for the title to come out, but I do think it has reminded me that we do need to reactivate our conversations with the title holders around what that might look like, and then we can engage with the committee depending on where it sits in the next 6 months. But I think that's work that we need to have as an action point.
Sounds like there's certainly merit in reviewing and refining some of that detail there, by the sounds. Now, the second question was around I should have written it down. You mentioned that there might be, you'll be looking at a potential further plant, a wastewater plant, somewhere in the future. So given the current forecast in terms of growth and the current plans in terms of capex throughout talking about our area initially, when do you think that would be likely that Taronga would need another plant? Just thinking about Taronga at this stage, because that's the current situation.
I'll take this one if you like. Yeah, the short answer is it all depends on where that growth occurs. So at the moment, we're well set up for Tutumu to bring that through. We're well set up for Tariko West. But the further remnants to the south of the city, lower Belk, okay, but when we get into the upper Belk areas, the transmission lines from there to the southern pipeline are undersized. And if we have to start putting in enormous pipelines again over those distances, it may be wiser, more cost effective to put in another treatment plant somewhere. And it might be up there, it could be up the west, it could be whatever. But we will need to behead some of the catchment somewhere in order to take that growth. So it all depends on where the growth occurs and when, is the short answer. But at the moment, we're well set up for the planned growth that's occurring right now, definitely.
Actually, kind of two, which were around these cultural matters. But I wanted to say something with regards to what Wally was raising. So I'll go back to my first original questions before I forget. So paragraph 3. Just some discussion we've had earlier as a committee with in a workshop type of process working with committee members, we've found it beneficial to have our, like Te Rangi Māori, work alongside the other consultants. So we found it effective to cuts down a lot of time when we do meet as a workshop, and it allows any issues to be kind of documented and followed up for us then to discuss at these workshop components. So I was wondering, with that, are we still following? I heard Becca's been doing the review. Are we still doing that with having Te Rangi Māori work with us outside of the workshops too? Okay.
The short answer is yes.
Oh,
So the integrated approach where it's a team effort, rather than having the two reports, it's going to be one report, and Te Rangi Māori has been participating with Becca and others in relation to the production of that report. So I think the answer is yes.
Oh, yeah. No, that's, yeah, because there's been a bit of work on that, and that's good. It's mean. And the other one, number 13, and I see in the presentation, because it's an Environmental Mitigation and Enhancement Fund, and it's where do we put the cultural definition? In here, it's part of the environmental effects, but sometimes it could be, these are the cultural effects or impacts or issues. And I think I read it right. Environment is to include, how it says in the report, cultural. But sometimes, like for instance, that was an example, but it was clarified. If it is separated, sometimes we lose the whole coordination with the consent being an environmental, which includes cultural. But I wanted to raise that point because I was wondering if Te Rangi Māori was still part of the process. And we've got to be careful. I think it'll be good for us, well, for me anyway, to, if we're talking about the consent and we're following the principles in the consent with our definitions, I think it might be part of it, the workshop, if we have some of those definitions of what that environmental means, you know, because to me it's inclusive of the cultural, economic, there's the four bottom lines, quadruple bottom lines, environmental and social, yeah. So to me, there was a support and a clarification that included that because of that's what Rangi Māori is kind of working in that space to make sure it's included in the environmental.
Just on that, Des, so I understand this is wording out of the resource consent, so I'm not sure to the extent to which we can change that now, but I think it's a fair point you make. Back to my point in terms of what we do with this fund, I do think that the shape of the measures that the fund might provide is something that's yet to be determined, and I think within that conversation there is the definition of what is an effect and what is the fund trying to which effects is the fund trying to mitigate, remedy, or avoid. So I think your point is well made on it, but I think we can get to that if we start talking about what the future of that fund is.
And if I may just add to that, so this committee has sole discretion over those funds. So you are the decision-making body as to how they're distributed, where they go, and what benefits you want from them. So you do make that decision, and you hold the full decision-making power for that fund. And it's sitting at around $850 at the moment, and from memory we contribute $50,000 a year with CPI on top of that. So over the term of the consent, which is 35 years, it's going to be over $1 million. So there is a fund there for this committee to use as it sees fit within the remit of that resource consent, but you are the decision-making body.
Through you, Chair, and just related to that fund, and probably a bit more for my information maybe, and maybe others, but what did it start at? What did the fund start at? Because you said it's 50, what was the initial? And then probably a further question which probably relates to your earlier presentation, or the earlier presentation on the Three Waters done well. There was discussion about what might happen to this committee. So I think it also flows what might happen to the administration or the management of that fund should it go. And I suppose the answer is work in progress, but I was probably, or do you see the city staying? But I'm assuming that one of the early conversations was what and would this committee remain under the new model, or in what form? And I think you just said a few minutes ago that the fund is administered by this, so I probably just wanting confirmation that that all needs to be looked at in the wash as it actually happens. So the first question is, what was the initial contribution startup for this fund? Because you said 50k will get added, and there's 850 left, and then where might this be administered under the new potential CCO?
Thank you. Yes, it started off with $50,000. So it's had $50,000 a year added to it over time. That, and about 4 or 5 years ago, we adjusted that $50,000 to be CPI adjusted as well. So it's 50,000 plus whatever percentage CPI goes up by. So it'll be slightly over $50,000 a year now. The second part, so over time, the fund has built up. There have only been 2 occasions where it's been drawn down. There were 2 contracts let through the fund, but that was a long time ago, so nothing has happened in that regard for over probably 10 years. It hasn't been drawn down at all. The second part of the question was the future of the committee. So it is a condition of consent, so the committee will last at least as long as the consent. Whether it's still a committee of council or a committee of the CCO, I don't know. That will be a decision for our council to make. But I'm sure it will stay in existence.
I think then the next follow-on question is what happens to the fund, and I think the point is that we had a recommendation that, you know, all these things be considered. I think that has to be added into it. It's also the future of the fund and the decision-making on the fund that needs to be bundled into the consideration around the delivery model.
Kia ora. This is getting back to, Wally, you raised the point about the infrastructure catering for the growth as projected. Now, does that growth include Māori land interests like our marae and Papakainga? Was that work still need to be completed to ascertain that there is capacity? Because there's a lot of undeveloped Māori land. And once you develop it, you could throw it out. It's happened before, rifle range, over 20 years ago. So anyway, is the Māori land aspect of growth included in the projections for this current growth, that it'll be sufficient?
So what we've provided for in our growth so far is the Papakainga and marae servicing, but for Māori land in general, no, we have not made any provision for that. It's not zoned for that servicing, so at the moment it does not form part of our planning, long-term planning, presently.
Wally, I just googled the fund criteria, and I'm just reading on the website here, basically in terms of the discharge consent, and I'll read it. Initiatives can include, in brackets, but are not limited to, close bracket, monitoring the cultural effects and involvement of tangata whenua in sampling, testing, monitoring and research into issues relevant to water quality and ecological issues. So is that specified in the consent, or is that part of the policy around the EMEF?
I'll answer this one if I can, through the chair. So there are a number of aspects that the fund can be spent on that are included in the consent conditions, but it's not a exhaustive list. It states that it can include these things, but can also be used for other purposes, dependent on what the committee deem is appropriate. So that's one of those that's included in the consent, I believe. But there are maybe 4 or 5 different aspects that are included in there.
Thanks, Bradley. So as I read it there, that was part of the consent condition. So, yes. Yeah. Yes? I believe so. Okay.
Bring the consent up, but I'm pretty sure that is actually specified in the consent.
Really strong, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
There's probably a couple of points that, one I did want to actually us to have a conversation about was the proposal that the project business case be deferred. If anyone had any thoughts on that. I mean, I assume you're saying defer until the water delivery model deliberations have happened?
Yes, I would assume until we could get it in front of the new board, I guess, for them to consider sort of where we'd been and what the next steps would be in the process.
Through you, Chair, and just on the PBC, I mean, how far through are we? What in terms of, you know, how much have we time spent, resource, and percentage-wise? Do you think we're closer than the end, or we're still more at the start? I mean, probably an open question.
I would say we're probably halfway through. Well, yeah, but I guess it's the crunchy decision-making steps that are to come. So we are proposing that we've done long list identification, and it would just be not proceeding with the assessment of that long list to a short list. I guess we feel that is a step too far, and that would be making some decisions that we don't feel are appropriate and that should be considered by the board in the first instance.
So from a work program, given there's going to be a reasonable amount of time between even the through if we go and then there is a transition, how does that affect our work plan? Is there, you know, sort of you're working on a project and all of a sudden just go, whoa, hang on, wait, there's something else coming. What does that mean practically, I guess?
Yep.
I guess we're fortunate that, for example, if you remember what Jane said about this all starting off around the outfall, you know, that's all tied up into our consents. All our consents expire in 2040, so there is time. We started this process on purpose quite early to make sure that we brought as many people along with us as we could. So that's how it was sort of set up. So in terms of time frames, having a pause while we go through this sort of uncertainty is not super critical at this point. We've done some really great work through the PBC. We wouldn't want to lose any of that, but at the same time, having this pause is not going to affect the outcome. Where we're still looking, you know, to renew our consents in 2040. Those sort of decisions around whether there's parts of the network that may need to be treated in a different way to the currently are. That's all that can all be wrapped up in that consenting process. So, yeah, there's still significant time before that becomes critical pathway.
There is one element, I think, though, that's pre-2040, and that's the ongoing conversation around the decommissioning of the oxidation ponds in Rangataua, which I think is actually we're past the date, but anyway, that's a thing to note. The concern I have is that it just falls off the table completely. So while there may be a deferral, while decisions are made, and I think if I recall rightly on the 15th of July, and then there'll be some transitioning, but it'd be a concern if it was just, let's leave it and then send it over to this next entity, and then just they'll do with it what they will. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but that's the concern, I think.
Yeah, absolutely note that point about the pond. I guess the requirement for what we've done over the last couple of years hasn't changed. We're still going to, whether we're still part of council or a CCO, that infrastructure still needs reconsenting. The drivers of what we're doing will still be there. So.
Didn't even have my thinking. Any yes.
Program business case.
Councillor Tate.
Sorry, just a quick point. I'm just wondering whether it's useful if someone can direct us where we could find the long list. Is it worthwhile us looking at that and understanding what's on it?
Yeah, perhaps I can recirculate what I've previously presented. We had a stack of slides, I think, which sort of covers the process to date. Yep. Okay.
Also, the principles document. I'm calling it that. I know it had another name, perhaps, but there was the wordsmithing we did on that document, the KPIs and so forth. That might be helpful.
They'll be on that slide deck.
Oh, okay.
Great.
All right, well, perhaps we'll do it again just to for clarity. So we can see the recommendation. I've moved it. Councillor Taylor has seconded it. So all those in favour, say aye. Any opposed? None. Motion's carried.
And then that's done like items, so it's just a closing public hearing.
All right, who'd like to close the hui? Anyone? Des, you came late, so I think that's fair.